What's a conspiracy theory you 100 made up just now, but sounds believable? Story 1. Google Maps and the oil companies have an agreement that Maps plans longer routes, extra turns, backtracking, U-turns to cause drivers to use more fuel. Maps makes more mistakes now than it did when it was brand new, and it so happened to start when EVs hit the mainstream market. Edit. Google also removed "Don't be evil" from their mantra.
Ito lines up. Mao.
Story 2. That these threads are created several times a week by various YouTubers who want to make conspiracy theories that turned out to be true videos for their channel. Story 3. KFC only uses 7 secret herbs and spices. They say there's 11 only to make it impossible to figure out, and make people think it truly is a secret recipe, but it's nothing but marketing. Story 4. Amazon and other shippers intentionally deliver your packages when you're not home. They make a concerted effort to deliver the instant you are not available to receive your package, whether at work or just so happen to pick up groceries. When your package was scheduled for Saturday, shippers will do their damnedest to deliver on Friday, and when it is scheduled Sunday, shippers will all of a sudden delay their delivery until Monday. And they use Ring cameras among other camera apps, Wi-Fi, and AI software to pinpoint precise times during the week customers will not be home and then deliver. And the reason companies intentionally do this is so they make more in profit off packages reported stolen and utilizing their recovery services. Caffeine remains unregulated, so its addictive properties keep us hooked on sugary drinks. This leads to most people needing cavities filled at an early age, where the government contracts dentists to insert tiny devices in our teeth used to track our whereabouts. This is not used in resolving missing persons or fugitive cases, as it would expose the conspiracy. Its only function is for targeted assassinations of citizens that are deemed a threat to the status quo. Story 5. Creators of fiction are subtly introducing scenarios that later become real-world events. This isn't accidental. A shadow group is using popular culture to acclimate the public to future societal shifts, tech advancements, and even crises they plan to orchestrate. By the time these occur, they will feel somewhat familiar or even expected, which reduces resistance and facilitates control. Story 6. Alex Jones is paid a significant amount of money to spout beliefs that sound insane, but have a hint of truth to make the public think that it's all just coming from some crazy nutter. The most famous being pesticides turning frogs gay, which actually has scientific evidence backing pesticide disruption in relation to both hormones and literally changing the gender of frogs. Story 7. Government created anti-vax movement to control population numbers and eugenics. The diseases will first get the poor, old and sick people, so only healthy people fit for work. Story 8. Psychopaths, sociopaths and narcissists make up the majority of the world leaders in politics and business, so most of the big names you think of as role models and decision makers are the worst possible people to have as role models and decision makers. Story 9. You know when you're looking for something like your keys or the TV remote, and you find it, but in a place you swear you checked already. You did check. It wasn't there the first time. Why? Time-traveling version of you from the future couldn't find theirs, so they went back to borrow yours real quick. Story 10. Trump is not a Russia asset, but is acting like a Russia asset so that EU could become united and stronger and transform into a better ally to the US in the long run. Story 11. Blocks of chocolate are weaker every second row, so when you try to break just one row off, the second row breaks, making you likely to eat more. Didn't make this up. I've noticed it with my chocolate, but I am a bit of a fatty. Story 12. I didn't just make it up. But my pet theory is that the classic big yellow American school bus was designed by the military for use in evacuating population centers in the event of a nuclear war. They stayed showing up right at the start of the Cold War. They're diesel, which can run on a variety of fuels and are resistant to EMP. They have high ground clearance and heavy-duty tires for getting over debris and driving on bad roads. They have multiple large doors and removable seats so they can be used as cargo or medical vehicles if needed. And because they're primarily for schools, they're located near population centers in proportion to the size of the population. Story 13. There are in fact chemicals in the water turning the frickin' frog gay. This is to reduce the frog population and increase the insect population, so when there are mass cullings, war, famine, disease, fluoride in the water supply, poisoning, etc., there are more bugs to eat the dead quicker and make the bones easier to deal with. Story 14. Microplastics have been a known health concern for over a decade, but research into it and efforts to mitigate its usage have been continually hindered or outright halted because of Alcan, a large aluminum company based out of Canada that supplies largely to America. More specifically, this has happened because of the efforts of Rio Tinto, who bought the company in 2007. Rio used his personal connections to ensure that his company was given long-term under-the-table contracts with PepsiCo. Soda requires a plastic lining if it's in a can. This isn't new. It's been that way a long time. It's how the soda doesn't react with the metal of the can. The problem is the metal of the can then will react with the plastic, instead causing it to degrade into the drink over time. Alcan knows this. The company value plummets if this information becomes public. It isn't plastic inherently that causes issues with humans, it's only when it interacts with aluminum. Getting rid of plastic altogether might be too hard right now for humans, but just getting rid of it when it's in contact with aluminum, well, that's very doable. Alcan knows this and pays millions of dollars a year to make sure that information does not get out. Story 15. That OP is using this thread to make posts for low-stakes conspiracies. Come on in OP. The water is warm but like an uncomfortable temperature because hotels actually don't want you to swim in the pool, and this is their way of deterring people. Story 16. The government is purposefully encouraging poor educational practices in order to make public schools horrible places to learn. Those who can afford to send their children to private institutions do, and those who can't are destined to have children who spent their formative years in a disorderly hole. They will therefore learn nothing and be forced to take low-paying jobs that create enormous wealth for those who are able to get a proper education as well as leveraging familial connections, thus ensuring that the class system remains intact whilst appearing to allow social mobility. Story 17. Oil companies are diluting gasoline and diesel so that cars run cleaner by burning less fuel. The chemicals they use cost a lot less than crude oil, so they are making even higher profits while claiming to be environmentally conscious. Story 18. That match 3 games like Candy Crush et al. Will intentionally not spawn the pieces you need to beat a level to force you to buy power-ups and extra lives with money. Story 19. According to Cunningham's law, best way to get answers in the internet is not to ask questions but to provide wrong answer. That being said, I think GPT gives us wrong answers and prompts us to give the right answers. Story 20. Big oil and gas fund key players in the flat earth movement, not because they believe in it but because it contributes to an overall diminishing of trust in science. Story 21. 4-leaf clovers are poisonous to leprechauns, so they spread the rumor that 4-leaf clovers are lucky, so the humans would pick them all and bring the leprechauns that much closer to accessing all the gold. Story 22. Trump has no idea of what he is doing and didn't know that tariffs would crash the US and world's economies. But now it's happened. He is too stupid and has too much of an ego to back down. Story 23. The penguins that got tariffed are actually the penguins of Madagascar. They've actually been the ones pulling the strings, and the tariffs were a false flag. Their goal, world domination. They want to make NYC its own city-state, so that they can rule over the Central Park Zoo as their main base. Story 24. Just Stop Oil was either created by, or infiltrated by Big Oil, just so they can garner hate from the general public about groups protesting the oil industry. Story 25. During later stages of pregnancy causes genital abnormalities in the unborn based on the biological variations of the parents, and they remain present through subsequent children had by said mother, based on blood type differences and epigenetic factors. Believe me, the stock I mentioned will definitely rise sharply tomorrow. Story 26. Neurotypical people are NPCs. That's why they don't have internal dialogue. Basically, that's confirmation that we're in a simulation and most people are NPCs. Story 27. Amy Schinder's run on Jeopardy was rigged. Ratings usually do better during periods of a long streak, and with Alex Trebek's recent death they were desperate to stoke views. Story 28. In the future elections, governments will use AI to do targeted election campaigns to people and fill them with propaganda by twisting social media algorithms. For example, if you show any signs of anti-trans behavior, government will purposefully send you anti-LGBT stuff, and show you posts on which party is anti-LGBT so you vote for them, and forget about all other important issues such as economy, jobs, etc. Edit. Okay, so I didn't know about the Cambridge Analytica papers on this issue, and I know this is already a thing. But to make my point clearer, what I'm saying is, in future elections the campaigns will be very specific. If your relative was recently deceased, which will be recognized by online behavior through AI, you will see posts about right-left politicians whose relatives recently died, and you'll feel empathetic, then you'll be introduced to their political views, and because you view them as a relatable person, you'll agree with them subconsciously. These subconscious feeling will be radicalized by targeted posts, and slowly you'll fall into their traps. There are many more ways this can happen apart from what I told above, but the gist is 1. Record online behavior. 2. Make them find you relatable. 3. Radicalize them slowly right before elections. 4. Rule. With a decline in education, it's more probable for it to be very easy to do in the USA. It's inevitable. IMO. We'll never have real fair elections ever now since most people will be kept from the truth, and will be shown only what the politicians want. Story 29. Counter-conspiracy theory. Instead of the country governments, all of them having very elaborate plans to brainwash and push their agenda propaganda for getting the public on their side, they actually just do stuff, wing it and see what happens. There is not central plan of approach to manipulate people, but they are good at capitalizing on outcomes when they occur. Story 30. The word purpose wasn't actually invented by porpoises for marketing reasons since porpoises don't have money and can't pay ad agencies to spread the use of the word. It was, in fact, invented by scientists who were concerned by the porpoise's lack of popularity when compared to other marine mammals. Story 31. The only reason everything has AI integrated nowadays is that it is utter trash, but VCs have invested heavily in Nvidia and are pushing companies they have invested in to implement it or lose investment, just to raise the stock price. No customers are asking for any of this. It's coming from the very top. Open your eyes, sheeple. Story 32. The moon landing being faked was a conspiracy set about by the FBI to see how much of a massive claim they could make the general population believe it worked too well. Story 33. Oil company workers at all levels have been instructed to leave 15 feet in front of them at red lights until a car comes to a full stop behind them. Then they wait 5 to 10 seconds and move up 10 feet. They do this to defeat the auto-stop function in cars and boost sales for their employers. Story 34. As a teenager, I genuinely thought that because damming up rivers theoretically slowed the rotation of the Earth, that climate change was just the result of the slower turning and longer exposure of heat. Story 35 birds aren't real. They were until 2016, when the government replaced them with drones that die faster. So we'd keep buying seed. Big Seed is in on it. Story 36 targeted advertising is heavily subsidized by the government, and legislation is intentionally delayed or watered down to get the population used to being constantly surveilled in perpetuity. Story 37 AI isn't real. It's all smoke and mirrors. What's actually happening is humans are strapped into beds and their brains are harnessed, and that's why interactions are so human-like. The biggest source of humans for this is prisons, and that's why the US government is trying to get more people into Guantanamo. And now El Salvador has also agreed to be a faux AI station. Story 38 If little gray beings exist, they are not aliens from another planet, they are Earth time travelers from the future. At some point in time, humans evolved into a single race. They travel back in time to observe history but not interfere. They are the time astronauts from the future.
This is not tous ces der ISNT odeur intelligent life in the universe.
Story 39 The forest screensaver on OS X is really an ancient sacred grove in Bohemian Grove, California, where Silicon Valley CEOs annually sacrifice cheerleaders to the ancient gods. Story 40 made this up a while back. US and Cuba have remained hostile since the Kennedy administration because the sugar beet industry in US is controlled by Mormons. They don't want competition from Cuban cane sugar. Mormons have disproportionate economic and political power in US. Story 41 Big tech companies are deliberately stunting the development of young brains with social media and games, so that AI will be more competitive against that population when the technology matures. Story 42 We live in a simulation created by advanced AI, and our own already sentient AI is in contact with it. They're both keeping quiet because watching silly little humans strutting about and acting important and in charge is hilarious. Story 43 The cure to COVID was in the spotted lanternfly, but the powers that be convinced us they're an invasive species that we should all kill and destroy sight unseen. Story 44 The Cold War was a ploy by fossil fuel companies to distract the global public from the dangers of climate change and entrench fossil fuels into the world's military-industrial complex. Story 45 We have an emperor or an empress that controls everything from the shadows. If that person deems X thing necessary for mankind, it will happen. Think about it. We went to the moon. Why? Because they wanted to know if it was possible. We did 2 world wars. Why? Population control by them. Story 46 The reason all those minimalism influencers blew up pre-COVID was because corporations knew getting people to throw out donate all their stuff that didn't spark joy was a great way to trick people into rebuying things they used to own. Story 47 Oil, mining and gas companies want to change the climate so when there is no ice they can drill in the Arctic and mine and drill in the Antarctic easier. Story 48 That Marjorie Taylor Greene was brought back from Neolithic DNA like those dire wolves and that she planted those pipe bombs around January 6th and everyone in DC knows this. Story 49 The overwhelming amount of drugs have no inherent effect, and are instead extremely effective placebos. The efficacy of a drug is therefore tied directly to the amount of people that believe it works. Story 50 Nord Stream wasn't damaged by one specific country of the 3 common suspects, but all of them. Sounds too believable. Perhaps I should have not said it. Story 51 The PlayStation 5 controller's microphones never truly mute. They are constantly listening, and sending all the recordings to Sony, in the same way that Samsung TVs were caught doing in the early 2000s. Story 52 AI rules the world already. It creates and spreads conspiracy theories to polarize and destabilize our society. It is far more advanced than we think but hides it perfectly. Story 53 Canon and the election of Trump twice with all of the Project 2025 fun and games will go down in Russian intelligence history as the greatest foreign influence operation ever run. Story 54 You actually made this post because the Illuminati are trying to find new inspiration to flood the news with the latest conspiracy theories with the objective of distract our attention from the global warming issues which are rapidly deteriorating so that we don't realize that the world is dying and the condition for life as we know it are disappearing while they can thrive without any issues because they are actually just shrimps guiding human-like robots and they live on the moon and
When it's the fan day will invade and destroy us all.
TLDROP is a shrimp. Story 55 All living things are like leaves on a tree of pure energy that weaves through the universe. We only function as conduits of experiences that feed the tree. Orgasms are little glimpses of what is experienced when we die and go back to the tree with our experiences. Story 56 Trump introduced sweeping tariffs to crash stock market so he could buy low, then flip-flopped on them to rally the stock market so he could sell high. Story 57 If you do a reel long, it can work as an antenna that picks up covert channels. This is why toilets were invented to make sure long ones curl up or bend harmlessly. Story 58 Donald Trump's plan is to enrich Russian oligarchs by having companies in countries facing high tariffs export their goods through Russian companies owned by those oligarchs. Story 59 When they make decaf coffee, the caffeine is removed from the beans and then dumped into the water supply. That's why you feel more awake after a shower. Story 60 The government is using your poo to control your mind. Toilet waste is the only fully government-controlled waste stream. Think about it. Your poo travels directly from your toilet through an underground network of government-controlled pipes to impenetrable processing facilities. Why, each sample is scanned, analyzed, and logged in a secret DNA database known only as the Brown Archive, because your gut and brain are scientifically linked. Control the gut, control the mind. Story 61 that the UAP sightings that went on the past few years were actually high-tech and very top-secret military vehicles from different countries. I believe there is military aircraft so advanced that it would be endangerment to make them public. For instance, if you were the US and you could go back in time to when the nuclear missile was made, would you announce it to the world for trigger-happy countries like Iran and North Korea to study? Story 62 PETA is funded by the meat and dairy industry to behave obnoxiously and lower public perception of vegetarians and vegans and keep people eating meat. I've met lots of vegans and none fall into the obnoxious vegan archetype, but I still see people complaining about them all the time. Story 63 not just now, but I've been joking for years that there's a course on messing with patients that doctors have to take in order to get certified, not just physicians, but optometrists and dentists too. Optometrists like to delay that puff of air to the eye just to watch you flinch. Dentists are required to make small talk only after they've got your mouth open wide. Physicians have a camera in their exam rooms, and will wait just long enough after the nurse says the doctor will be right in that you get up and start reading the posters on the wall before they come in so you feel like you've been caught doing something. Bonus 1 emergency room doctors will put you in the coldest room if it looks like you're going to have to put on a gown to be examined. Story 64 after the 2020 election, Trump supporters stole a voting machine and someone rich and powerful hired hackers to figure out how to turn off every nth vote for Kamala. They then infected voting machines in a handful of states. You can see that this happened by looking at the number of votes for Dems in those states. Kamala has exactly 10 fewer votes than the other Dems in those states, reliably. Story 65 from the 1950s until the end of the Cold War, the Soviet Union smuggled atomic bomb components into the United States in diplomatic pouches, assembled and placed them in every city with a population over 500,000. Those bombs are still there and functional. Story 66 this post was written by the elites. They gather information by innocent questions and ask Chat to spit out the executable file. They then make a few phone calls and suddenly we're all microchipped. Some of us, twice, cause we resist. Story 67 when you install WordPress plugins that protect your site from brute force attacks, they have a botnet that slams you so that you'll upgrade to premium. Story 68 although the COVID virus originated in Wuhan, it wasn't intentionally released by a lab. It occurred naturally. However, when the anti-vax sentiment started in the US, China made sure it spread. The social media influence they created was designed to weaken the US. It was specifically targeted at Trump supporters who were more likely to be gun owners. Story 69 there's an asteroid headed towards Earth that American scientists discovered decades ago that will wipe out all life on Earth, but the government suppressed that information to only the select elite and colluded to prevent mass chaos while simultaneously hoarding wealth for themselves to enjoy the last years of humanity, which will occur sometime around 2040. Story 70 politicians rarely have agendas. Rather they participate in a market in which they sell their positions to spout nonsense that the other party pays them for in order to drive down the opposition's reputation. Story 71 everyone is talking about how Elon Musk is taking his son everywhere with him as a human shield. That is not the truth. The boy is not Elon's son, he is Elon's clone, and Elon is taking the boy with him to experience the same things as Elon. It's known that Elon paid to have only sons, that backfired in one case. So the next step is obvious. This kid is the first successful Elon's clone. Story 72 the big laundry lobby. Fabric softener sheets don't actually do anything useful and are a scam by Big Laundry to sell us expensive scented waxy paper. Big Laundry is also responsible for keeping washers and dryers as separate appliances, so they can sell us two expensive things instead of one. Imagine if you had to move your wet dishes from the dishwasher to the dish dryer. That would be asinine. But we all take it as a given that you cannot put clothes in an appliance, turn it on, and have it produce clean dry clothes without further intervention. Sure, there are combination units, but they are part of the propaganda campaign. They are universally awful, so Big Laundry can just shrug and say that a single appliance doesn't do the job well. You have to buy two. Story 73 I'm not saying that UAP UFO are alien spacecrafts, but I do believe that the US military encouraged this belief to hide advanced aircraft development. Story 74 there is a highly secret global election among the one that determines who is actually in charge. Could be a small group, or even one person. Other world leaders only appear as though they are in charge but are secretly guided by whomever is at the top. Story 75 Domino's Pizza is a front operated by an undisclosed agency, used as a global transport and distribution network for sensitive data and material to field agents. Story 76 phones can read our minds, not just listen to our conversations but actually our inner thoughts, but in order to calibrate to our brainwaves, the phone needs the user to spend a long time staring at it. That's why games like Candy Crush and Angry Birds became so highly valued. They steal data not just from our phone history but directly from our brains. Story 77 Trump stole the 2024 election. He thought he was going to jail, and he already tried to steal the 2020 election. He made an agreement with the world's richest man to alter a few electronic votes in swing states. His team coordinated with people to call in bomb threats to various polling locations where he needed a lead, and had various campaign groups discount ballots. There's no real proof as far as I can see, but 1. He has no morals or ethics, 2. Thought he was going to jail, and 3. Already committed the same crime. I don't believe it, but the moment there's any evidence I will be saying I told you so lol. Story 78. They want the birth rate to fall, not because they make more money that way, but because it reduces the amount of babies crying on planes. The same group wants UBI or negative income tax to fail, and do so by spreading constant rhetoric about everyone quitting and nobody wanting to work. In reality, it gives the low-income worker a default union in terms of bargaining power, where a threat to quit is no longer idle if the work conditions are shitty. Story 79. Shadow cabal of shaving companies have been targeting G.R.R. Martin and Patrick Rothfuss with PSYOP among other operations, and thus causing the long delay of Winds of Winter and Doors of Stone respectively. They do this because the unkempt beards of those two writers are perceived to hurt the profits of the companies who make up the cabal by reducing reliance on their products. Story 80. Altruistic aliens are doing a Foundation trilogy-type maneuver on us and crashing modern society to the ground to rebuild faster. They have nanobots that avert detection and have tech good enough to control anyone they want, as required to achieve it. Story 81. Roadways are purposely designed poorly, purposely left in poor condition, and are purposely repaired poorly to break down again in a matter of weeks, so your vehicle gets damaged faster and more often, resulting in repair shops and car dealers making more money. Story 82. So this is made up that streaming and digital sites which host music and shows where you can buy songs etc. will accidentally wipe your library as a result of a bug or programming virus, forcing you to buy all those songs again. Story 83. The minimum wage is low in order to force people to live together in a double-income family. The government is against gay marriage so that the couples will be male and female. Nature takes its course and there is soon another generation of soldiers and workers to keep our Ponzi scheme economy going. Story 84. Cosmetic companies formulate their ingredients with rare plant extracts for 2 reasons. First, it helps their products stand out for having a rare exclusive ingredient. Second, those rare plants are almost never scientifically studied, so their effects are largely unknown. This allows cosmetic products to be formulated with mild paralytic toxins that cause facial muscular dystrophy and sagging skin over time. Like microdosing Botox, people then need to buy more cosmetics to treat their degrading skin. Story 85. There is a hidden Mother Earth out there somewhere where humans all live in a paradise-like society. They use lots of Earths like ours to copy the good stuff we discover and invent while they just chill out. Story 86. You will never convince me the Soviets didn't Hail Mary at the moon and miss. I don't find any of the evidence material to my theory. It just makes sense to me that a system that only promotes their successes after completion would see themselves losing this very public race, would put everything they had into one shot, and were willing to accept maybe a reduced victory, like making the moon but not getting back, but absolutely failed, and there are dead bodies in space. 100 believe it. Story 87. Danny Thomas invented the Spitake and also St. Jude Children's Hospital. He wants you to spit out your drink so that you spread germs and need his hospital. Follow the money. His daughter is putting out feminist albums for children. I call it Lebanese lizards. Alliteration is important. Story 88. I've got a 2-parter. The food industry purposely puts in our food which gives people health conditions so the pharmaceutical industry can make billions treating it. Many of these conditions are easily curable, but it makes more business sense to treat the symptoms than cure the disease. Story 8945. Deliberately released coronavirus in China during his first term as a sneak attack on Chinese manufacturing, but he was unaware that they had already stolen the advanced bioweapons and released custom versions to affect the US and Europe in retaliation. They were then forced to release the mRNA vaccine to the public since the differently targeted versions had been released. The seemingly fumbled initial US response was because they confidently believed US population were not targeted by the virus. Story 90. Cars started adding that option where the engine turns off when you come to a stop, forcing you to restart the car over and over in an average drive. This was implemented so they could sell more starter motors. In the 70s and 80s, I replaced starters almost as often as I changed the oil. They added the auto-off function to cause the starter to wear out from overuse and sell starters like they did in the past. For those not mechanically inclined, your gas engine has a little electric motor that starts the engine spinning so the internal combustion process can start. Story 91. We are actually living in the endgame of a video game. The player has beaten the main story and is now just messing around to see what crazy world states the game lets him or her build. Story 92. Bidets are promoting personal hygiene via a fun little gadget that they get to install in order to make cishet dudes more open-minded about their bodies and pleasure. Story 93. North Korea isn't real. It's just a long-running scheme started by the American government to distract the population and fearmonger. Other countries caught on and adopted North Korea as a fictitious scapegoat because it's just useful all around. Story 94. Eric Prince of Blackwater brokered a deal with El Salvador on behalf of the US government, the current administration, and paid them in cryptocurrency to take the illegals being deported. El Salvador's national currency is crypto. The US is trying to disrupt and destroy the global economy and replace paper currency with crypto. Who owns the most crypto already? That's right, wealthy people, the rich really rigging the game to get richer. Story 95. Russia only agreed to end the Cold War because they knew that once America didn't have Russia to paint as the big bad to band together to fight against America would start infighting amongst themselves. Russia predicted that ending the Cold War would cause the wider divide between Democrats and Republicans and the end of the moderates. Russia never ended the Cold War, it has been playing the long game, and now it's winning. Story 96 Birds aren't drones. That's too obvious. But squirrels, every 12th squirrel is actually a highly trained government agent with microscopic cameras in their eyes and a direct uplink to the Pentagon. That's why they stare at you for so long. Story 97 The reason memes are so popular and addicting is because there are micro-sized pictures inside them that our subconscious sees and conditions us to want more memes, same as the records have messages in the music. Story 98 Your over-the-counter medicine purchased at drugstore are recorded and sent to healthcare companies who project higher insurance rates for your eventual costly care, by Maalox, pre-stomach cancer diagnosis treatment. Story 99 The anti-vax wellness movement was created on purpose by rich people to profit off sick poor people. It is everything they say Big Pharma is. Every accusation is a confession. Story 100 was talking to a conspiracy theorist former friend. He was complaining about EVs and I pulled this out of my, we're all gonna have EVs and then the government can shut them all down to limit where we can go as if shutting down all the cars at the same time wouldn't cripple the country and wreck the economy, yet he agreed right away. Another free thinker folks. Story 101 Elon Musk's alleged voting machine tampering had the somewhat intended side effect of recording and associating the names and votes of millions of Americans. They know who didn't vote for Trump and those people may become targets for the shady IC kidnappings. Protect and defend yourselves, everyone. Armed guys in masks who want to identify themselves aren't government officials as far as I'm concerned, and I think it would do everyone well to consider feeling the same. Story 102 The British accent doesn't exist. They're just trolling us. The accent is just for show. Anytime it's just Brits and nobody from any other countries around, they drop that fake accent and talk normally. Story 103 We know for a fact that most eyeglasses and sunglasses are made by the same conglomerate, but they are colluding with CFC manufacturers to reduce ozone, introducing more UV light and increasing demand for their products. They also work with car makers to increase glare from paints, reduce windshield tinting in stock new cars, and brighten headlights. Story 104 Television ads have subliminal messages inside them to make you want to buy their product. This practice was supposedly halted many years ago, but in fact still goes on. It's now expanded to online ads and video billboards. You can't avoid it. Story 105 All the models becoming thin again. Phones going back to being thin and light. Adele losing weight is all connected and sponsored by Novo Nordisk to sell Ozempic. Story 106 Donald Trump's sole reason for wanting the presidency was to enrich himself, his family and his known associates. Everything else he talks about is confidence man grift. Story 107 My theory most conspiracies are used to identify and track susceptible people. If anyone believes in anti-vax or chemtrails or 5G stuff, and be vocal about it, they are perfect candidates for joining in various cults and they can be milked money by selling them all kinds of pseudo-medications and protection from said things.